Hello everyone and welcome back to Be Here Now. Now this is the second video I'll be doing about the history of Manchester. If you watched the first one, you remember that the Romans have been and gone and Britain was under attack by the Anglo-Saxons. So after the Romans left, the Mersey Basin and the Manchester Plain became a kind of frontier land caught between the southern kingdom of Mercia and the northern kingdom of Northumbria. Now Manchester itself isn't mentioned until the year 919 when King Edward the Elder of Wessex ordered his men to go to the settlement and man the fort there. By now Mameceaster had become Mameceaster and had fallen into regional insignificance once more. Now one of the few archaeological remains from that Dark Age period is a long earthwork running along the southeast of the city, Nico Ditch. Now I've come to the border of Gorton and Denton to see if I can find it. And here it is behind me, Magnum Fasatum, the Great Ditch. Now to the south lay the Anglo-Saxon kingdom of Mercia, to the north, Northumbria. So you might be scratching your head wondering what on earth I'm talking about. Well, it might not be much to look at, but here it is right here, a very, very subtle groove right through the middle of the fairway. So this section of the ditch through Denton Golf Course is only about 300 metres long altogether, but if you do head out that way trying to find it, don't be surprised if you're a little bit frustrated and also a little bit lost. Now the name Nico Ditch is a bit of a mystery. The first mention of it in history is Nico Ditch, the word Mikel being a Saxon word for great. It could also come from the Saxon word nekan, which means kill. Built sometime between the end of Roman occupation and the Norman conquest of 1066, there are two competing theories about its origin. The first is quite mundane, that it's simply a boundary between the two kingdoms Mercia and Northumbria. Now the more romantic explanation, and one that's kind of been dismissed over recent years, is that it's a defensive earthwork and that local men dug it in a single night, each man being allocated a certain section to dig and told to dig it to his own height. Now there's never been any archaeological evidence of any great battle taking place here, though local legends often talk about a battle between Saxons and Vikings and so on. Still, it's nice to have a bit of a mystery about something. In this modern day we know pretty much everything about everything, so I quite like the fact that we still don't know about something almost in the heart of our city. Now the ditch gave its name to Reddish nearby, probably not because it was blood red after a battle, but because it was reedy in parts. Reedy ditch, reddish. The ditch has its origin up near Ashton Moss, which was a very boggy patch of land that was probably very difficult to navigate back in the day. But that gives credence, I think, to the idea that it was a defensive earthwork. Now all that's been lost between Ordenshaw reservoirs and the golf course here, but I'm going to go the other way through Gorton and Levenshulme all the way to Fallowfield and see how much of its path I can trace. Right guys, so here's a very quick picture of where Nico Ditch once ran. It started off up here near Ashton Moss, ran through what is today Ordenshaw, through Denton Golf Course where I was filming, along Laburnum Road, through Gorton Cemetery, the bottom of Melon Plain Fields in Gorton, the route of Matthews Lane on Old Hall Drive, all the way to Plattfields Park in Fallowfield. After that it went on along possibly Brantingham Road in Chorlton, all the way to Stretford and then Urmston. I'm going to be checking out as much of this route as I can, seeing what remains of Nico Ditch today and what it looks like. So the ditch reappears here in Gorton Cemetery. You can quite clearly see the line of it behind me. This is obviously not what it looks like. It was a lot deeper and wider than this. And this is all artificially landscaped to fit the cemetery, and it certainly never carried water like this channel does today. So between the cemetery here and the golf course where I've been before, the lines of Laburnum Road and Cranbrook Road follow the line of the ditch. Interestingly, I'm just off a road called Ryder Brow Road over in Gorton. Now Ryder Brow used to be called Winning Hill, and it was called that because in the year 873 apparently there was a battle here between a local Saxon force and some Danish raiders, and after being victorious in the battle, the local Saxons went to the hill to rest and celebrate, hence why it's called Winning Hill. Now in my opinion, if it's worth anything, if you happen to be out looking for a ditch, the best place to see Nico Ditch is here. I'm at the bottom of Mellon's playing fields in Gorton, just off Mount Road. Now this is quite a length, to be honest, and it's very much preserved as it was, without intention. It's got its original width, and looks like much of its depth. Now of course it's covered in weeds and litter, but over the years it would have probably been a dumping ground anyway. The fact that the ditch is here at all is remarkable, and when you think about it, all this would have been redeveloped through the Industrial Revolution as the population of Manchester boomed. Lots of houses, lots of industry around here. Yet the ditch survived, and it survived quite intact, to be honest with you. It makes you think the amount of people that walk along here on an annual basis, from the school down the road, all the kids and all the people who live in the neighbourhood. Do they actually know what this is and what they're walking next to? So if you've not been impressed with what I've shown you so far, well, check this out. This is as good as it gets of Nico Ditch. I'm in Plattfields Park to the south of the city, and if you know Manchester, you know I'm not far from the Toast Rack building that used to belong to Manchester Metropolitan University. This section through the park is actually protected. It's got a fence around it. It's not much to look at, but here it is, it's protected here in Plattfields Park. Unfortunately, this is the last you can see of Nico Ditch, though it did eventually run all the way through to Chetham and the bogland of Moorside near Urmston, further giving credibility to the idea of it being a defensive ditch, bookended between one bog in the east of Ashton and another bog in the west. So while I'm here at Plattfields, let me just point out this Cathedral Arch. It's a window arch from Manchester Cathedral, taken during renovation in the 1800s. Now if you remember in the last episode I was talking about the red sandstone that Manchester sits on. Well, this is a great example of it, because they use this sandstone to construct many of Manchester's earliest buildings, including the cathedral. So Manchester and the north eventually fell under the control of invading Norsemen, a division of half the country that would be known as Danelaw. Then the Saxons took it back during the reign of Edward the Elder, who is recorded in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle as ordering his men to repair and man the fort here. Now after the Norman conquest in 1066, England was carved up and divvied out to French Norman aristocrats. The town of Salford and all its surrounding lands were handed to the de Grelly family, who became lords of the manor. So none of the de Grellys actually lived here until Robert de Grelly ordered the construction of a manor house over there in the tiny settlement of Manchester. So I don't know if you can see that behind me, but that's where the River Irk runs into the River Irwell, just in that tunnel that comes out from below Victoria Station. So Robert de Grelly ordered the building of his manor house over here at the confluence of the rivers, right in the heart of the old settlement. Now it became known as Manchester Castle, probably in later years, probably not at that time, because it was fortified, surrounded by ditches. But there's one ditch in particular, probably natural, possibly dug by hand, that has far more significance to this site. So what you have to try and do is imagine all this in its natural state. I know it's very hard, it's all concrete and tarmac and stone and brick and glass behind me. But imagine all this forested, or at least meadowland. It would have made an ideal place to put a settlement, because it's next to the River Irk and the Irwell, and also a third feature, natural or maybe not, hanging ditch, which back in its day, at this end at least, was 30 metres wide and 12 metres deep. Now that's quite a natural dip when you think about it, and it made a perfect defensive boundary for a young settlement. Hanging ditch curved in kind of a big arc from the top of what is now Corporation Street, down Todd Street, or what was then Toad Street, all the way to the Irwell. And it's thought that it could have even been the lost River Dean, which is what Deansgate is named after. So that stone archway is all that remains of Hanging Bridge. Built roughly the same time as the church and the college, it was probably one of the only bridges to cross Hanging Ditch, joining up the church and the college with the rest of the town, where the peasantry lived, if you like, which was over the other side. Now that's roughly where the shambles is at the moment. There was also a marketplace which developed roughly around there as well. This was all the town centre of Manchester, if you could call it a town. In the 15th century, Thomas de la Warr was rector of the parish church here, which sat where the cathedral sits today. And he applied to King Henry V to turn it into a collegiate church, which basically meant he wanted a college where priests could study. Now, as far as cathedrals go, Manchester's isn't particularly distinct, except probably for being notably indistinct. Compared to other northern cathedrals of its era, such as Lincoln or York Minster, Manchester's is quite plain looking. Still, its double aisles give it the widest nave of any English cathedral. So the church behind me was expanded in the 15th century, but Thomas also donated his manor house for use as the college building. Now for me, the college building is one of Manchester's most impressive pre-industrial buildings. Built from local sandstone, it will become one of the largest buildings in the city at the time, not including the church of course. Closed and then reopened during the Tudor period, the college was used during the English Civil War as an arsenal and a prison. Then it will fall into disuse before being revived once more by Humphrey Chetham, a successful local textile merchant, as a gift to the people in 1653. So just a few things of note inside the library. This is a common printing press developed in the 15th century and used all the way up until the 19th century. The one in the library here today is one of only 70 that survive around the world. Now, in order to reach the working people of Manchester who couldn't afford to come to the city centre just to read books, 5 smaller mobile libraries were commissioned at the time and put in churches around the area. This is one of them, and as you can see, the books are chained to the rack there. So in the beautifully decorated reading room hangs a portrait of Humphrey Chetham himself, and just over at the side in that window alcove is the desk where Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels studied in the mid-1840s. This, by the way, is a piece of Roman mortar found on the site in 1900. So it became the first free public library in the English-speaking world, and it was there that centuries later Frederick Engels and Karl Marx would meet on a regular basis to formulate their ideas about creating a more fair and just society. But that's another story for another day. So it was still quite an insignificant settlement with a small population of impoverished people working the land. But by the end of the Middle Ages, Manchester was a town on the up. Now in the centuries that would follow, Mancunians would develop a knack for a particular trade that would eventually put them on the map. Now if you liked this video, give us a like and subscribe. Next time I'll be looking at the very beginnings of the Industrial Revolution here in Manchester. But for now, see you later guys. I'll leave you with a view of the River Irwell.